They didn't even look me in the eye. After 20 years of service, my name is Julia, 20 years of early mornings, busted knuckles, missed birthdays, and emergency weekend repairs, I was told I was no longer needed, not in private, not with dignity, but in a fluorescent-lit conference room during the 8 a.m. shift meeting in front of 30 other people who suddenly found their shoelaces fascinating. Brooke Halley, the new plant manager fresh out of some MBA program, stood there in her perfectly tailored suit with a voice as cold as the steel we molded. "We're modernizing operations," she said, not once acknowledging the fact that I built half the systems she was about to throw away. "Some positions are being made redundant. Julia, your role is one of them." That was it. No warning. No conversation. Just a scripted execution from someone who had been here 8 months and thought she understood efficiency because she'd made a few PowerPoints. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just stood up, nodded once, and returned to my workstation to pack. My locker had a picture my son drew when he was 5. Me wearing a hard hat, standing next to a giant robot arm. I folded it gently and placed it next to my old coffee mug, my custom calibration logbook, and the backup drive I always kept in my bag. Around me, nobody said a word. Not Mark, who I helped through his divorce. Not Denise, who I covered for during her surgery recovery. Silence. It was like I had died and they were trying not to draw attention to the corpse. Brooke didn't even flinch when I walked past her, box in hand. She probably thought she'd just eliminated an outdated part in her system. But I knew the truth. I wasn't just a cog. I was the system. And the moment those machines hiccuped without me there to fix them, they'd finally understand what they'd thrown away. But by then, it wouldn't be free. That night, I sat in my garage, surrounded by shelves of old circuit boards, toolkits, and dusty processors, remnants of a lifetime spent solving problems before anyone else even knew they existed. 20 years. That's how long I kept that plant running on time, on budget, and one step ahead of breakdowns. There wasn't a single machine on that floor I hadn't touched, reprogrammed, or rebuilt with my own hands. They called it outdated. I called it engineered stability. I remembered the early years, back when we still made custom parts for aerospace contracts. We were understaffed and overworked. The company didn't have the money for new systems, so I taught myself how to code firmware from scratch, sometimes at 2A. With nothing but coffee and instinct. I was the one who created the predictive maintenance protocols that kept our lines from stalling. The diagnostics tools? Mine. The emergency override panel for the CNC bay? I welded that together myself during a holiday shift no one else volunteered for. But you won't find my name on any manual. No fancy title. No framed certificate. Just a short sentence in my termination paperwork. Position no longer aligns with future strategic direction. That's what you get for being indispensable in silence. The truth hit me hard, but not in a way that broke me. It clarified everything. They didn't fire a technician. They discarded a 20-year-old foundation and convinced themselves it was a step forward. Because it's easier to replace a name on a payroll than to quantify the value of tribal knowledge, especially when that knowledge lives in someone they've decided doesn't fit the rebrand. They thought the machines would keep humming without me because on paper they were programmed, but they didn't realize I was the one who knew how they thought. The subtle vibration that meant the spindle bearing was about to seize. The warning. Light that flickered for a split second. A false alarm for anyone else. But I knew it meant the sensor needed cleaning before it tripped a full system halt. I documented it all, for myself, never for them. Because deep down, I think I always knew one day they'd try to forget what kept them afloat. Let them try. Let them pretend an external firm could replicate what I built out of intuition, grit, and sleepless nights. My fingerprints weren't just on the machines. They were in the code, the flow, the culture of that entire operation. And they just handed all of that to strangers. But I wasn't bitter. No, What I felt was sharper than that. I felt ready. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam a door. I simply walked to my locker, unplugged the backup drive I'd been quietly updating for years, and left. No goodbye speech, no middle finger. Just me, a cardboard box, and a quiet resolve to let entropy do its job. Because here's what no one seemed to grasp. Not Brooke, not her consultants, not the wide-eyed junior techs who thought automation meant hitting install on the latest software update. These systems didn't run despite me. They ran because of me. And I knew the exact moment they'd stop. Over the years, I'd built a shadow archive. Every line of custom code, every firmware tweak, every calibration profile. They weren't company property, because no one ever formally recorded them, and no one ever asked. Half of what kept that place alive wasn't in a manual. It was in my backups, and in my head. So I waited. 6 weeks later, while I was drinking coffee on my back porch, the call came. I knew it would. The number on the screen flashed Westvale Precision. I didn't answer. A minute later, voicemail. A clipped, polite voice, Brooke, trying to mask panic with professionalism. Julia, we're experiencing a few challenges with the quality control system. I was hoping you might be available for a short consultation. Please let me know your availability. Translation. The plant's on fire, and the genius they replaced you with doesn't know where the hose is. I waited another hour. Then I called back. Hey, Brooke, I said, as if we were old colleagues instead of former employer and disposable asset. I'm available, but I work differently now. There was a pause. Of course. What would your consulting rate be? $350 an hour. 4-hour minimum, payable in advance. I'll also need a signed contract outlining the scope of work. That's more than double your previous salary, she said. That's because now I don't work for your approval. I work for results. She hesitated. I'll get back to you. 2 hours later, she called again, this time from a personal number. They agreed. The next morning, I walked through those double doors like a stranger on sacred ground. My badge said visitor. My clipboard said contractor. But the operators on the floor? They looked at me like a lifeline. The line was down. Sensors were misfiring. The calibration was off by a millimeter, and in our industry that might as well be a canyon. No one could explain why, but I could. It took me 32 minutes to isolate the fault. An overlooked firmware patch I'd designed 4 years ago, never. Documented, never shared, but critical to tolerances under cold weather startup. I opened my laptop, loaded the patch from my personal archive, and watched the line flicker back to life. Brooke watched too, silently. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. That machine humming again? That was the sound of leverage. Brooke didn't say much as I handed her the diagnostics. Just that forced smile corporate types wear when they realize the numbers they worship can't fix what's broken. She watched the production line roar back to life, nodding like she understood what just happened. She didn't. Thank you, she said tightly. That was efficient. It's what you paid for, I replied, zipping up my laptop bag. A beat of silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken history. Then she cleared her throat. Actually, while you're here, we've also had issues with the batch scanner systems in Bay 3. Intermittent failures. Nothing major, but I didn't let her finish. I'll need a new contract, I said, keeping my voice even. She blinked. We're just asking for a bit of support while we stabilize. No, I said plainly. You're asking for the kind of knowledge you fired. Brooke's face tightened. Come on, Julia, be reasonable. You're already on site. And I'm not your employee anymore. That was your decision, remember? I held her gaze. You made me a contractor. You decided I was expendable. I'm simply respecting the boundaries you set. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. I continued calmly. What you're experiencing isn't a temporary hiccup. It's what happens when you gut experience and replace it with buzzwords. Her cheeks flushed. Look, this isn't personal. It wasn't, until you made it personal. She looked like she wanted to throw something but instead pulled out her phone. Fine, I'll send the request to legal. I nodded. That's the process. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Julia, just so you know, this whole superiority act, it's not helping your image. I stopped, turned back slowly. I'm not here to manage my image, Brooke. I'm here to clean up your mess. But only on my terms. Her silence was answer enough. Outside, the air felt different. Cooler, cleaner. I wasn't just walking out of a job site. I was walking out of 20 years of being undervalued. And now, for the first time, I was being paid, literally, to remind them what they'd thrown away. After that last consultation, I didn't wait for another call. I poured everything into what I should have done years ago, building something of my own. Trantech Solutions was born at my dining room table with a refurbished desktop, whiteboard from a yard sale, and 2 decades of machine-specific headaches turned into marketable wisdom. I didn't want to just be the fixer anymore. I wanted to be the one who made the blueprint others relied on. My first product was simple in theory, impossible for anyone else to replicate in practice. Trantech, a custom-built system that tied together diagnostics, calibration protocols, machine learning, and legacy code into one seamless platform. It was built on everything I'd once scribbled into the margins of company notebooks, now turned proprietary. It could read old CNC firmware as easily as it could stream live analytics to a supervisor's iPad. And best of all, it only worked to full capacity with my authorization. No more watching someone wave a degree and a title while tossing years of trial and error into the trash. My first client wasn't Westvale. It was their competitor, an aerospace supplier that had heard about that woman who made a broken line purr again in under an hour. They didn't care that I didn't wear a blazer or bring in a team of consultants. They cared that I delivered. In 2 weeks, I cut their downtime by 38% and flagged 3 silent errors their systems hadn't caught in 6 months. Word spread. Quietly, but fast. Within 4 months, I had 3 clients, a growing reputation, and an inbox full of inquiries, from companies suddenly very interested in legacy optimization. I wasn't just rebuilding broken things, I was reinventing how they were managed, and no one could claim credit for it but me. Trantech became my armor. It didn't just make my skills essential, it made my absence dangerous. They had replaced me once. But now, if they wanted my help, it would be on my platform, at my price, and under my name. This wasn't a comeback. It was a recalibration. One only I could run. It didn't take long before the truth about Brooke came out. A whistleblower from accounting, someone I'd trained years ago, sent an anonymous tip to the board. Brooke had been receiving under-the-table consulting incentives from the same third-party tech firm she'd hired to replace me. A pretty little kickback package disguised as integration bonuses. The investigation was fast, brutal, and very, very public. She was escorted out of the same building I'd once walked through with a cardboard box in hand. Except this time, there were board members watching, security guards. Silence. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. The system I built had already spoken for me. A week later, I got a call from the VP of Operations, one of those names that used to be a ghost in the org chart, never seen, never heard. He asked for a meeting, not at Westvale, but at corporate HQ downtown. Neutral ground. Professional. He didn't waste time. We want to contract Trantech Solutions as a strategic partner, not just for Westvale, but across our entire manufacturing portfolio, 6 facilities nationwide. I didn't blink. You'll follow my integration protocols, license Trantech across all systems, and agree to a 5-year renewable contract with non-negotiable exclusivity in diagnostics and optimization. You follow my framework, or you find someone else. He didn't even flinch. Done. I walked out of that glass building with a signed agreement in my bag and my chin a little higher. The same company that once let me go without a second. Thought now relied on the very systems they dismissed and paid full price for what they once had at a salary. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity and compensation and control. This time, I didn't need a badge to walk the floor. I came in as a contractor, a founder, a name that carried value. When I visited West Vale again, new leadership, retrained operators, Tran-Track humming behind every terminal, I didn't just see redemption. I saw evolution, and every single line of code, every signature, every invoice reminded them, you can't fire what you don't understand, and you can't replace what you never took the time to learn. 1 year to the day after I was escorted out of West Vale with a cardboard box and a silence so loud it rang in my ears, I stood in my own corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, the hum of Trantech Solutions buzzing like a second heartbeat. On my desk sat a framed letter, handwritten, signed by the CEO of the parent corporation. Thank you for not walking away completely. We now understand what it means to invest in people, not just technology. I didn't frame it for vanity. I framed it as proof. Not that I needed validation anymore, but because sometimes the receipts are worth more than the revenge. Across the room, my team, real engineers, real techs, not some offshore algorithm shop, were whiteboarding upgrades for Tran-Track 3.0. Contracts were lined up through next year. Our systems were being installed in 4 new factories. But I wasn't chasing scale. I was building legacy. Because here's the truth. They called me outdated. Said the future didn't need people like me. But my systems? They still run. My code? Still cleaner, faster, smarter than anything they could automate. And me? I'm still here. The ones who replaced me aren't. Last month, I was invited to speak at a manufacturing leadership summit. I stood behind the podium, looked out at a crowd of decision-makers, executives, and engineers, and said, they told me I was obsolete, but the machines I built still work. The people I trained still fix what breaks. The only thing outdated was their leadership. The room was dead silent for a full beat. Then someone clapped, then more, until the whole room stood up. I didn't burn bridges. I built better ones, with fireproof foundations. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been replaced, underestimated, or pushed aside, just know, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming what they never imagined you could be. If this story hit home, do me a favor. Drop a comment below, smash that like, and hit subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.